Hey everyone, today you're gonna learn the secrets of installing new deck boards, and one you're only gonna learn right here. Let's start at the beginning, which you know is right at the front of the deck. Starting things off with tip number one, which is our first deck board. You can see I've already installed the fascia here at the front of my deck, which is simply 2 deck boards along the front. And this will be our first deck board, and I'm looking for a 1/2 inch overhang right here at the front of the deck, and I want that consistent. Now, the reason we install this deck board at the front is because we do not want to rip it. That is going to be saved for the last deck board. You'll see what I'm doing there coming up. So normally for the first board at the front, because our deck tool will not work, I like to use a bracket method. But take a look, I actually have 2 rim joists here, 1, 2, and this bracket method will not work. I will link in the description below to it so you guys can check it out. So what I'm gonna do instead is actually face screw on the front of my boards, and that is because my Camo deck tool will not work at the front. So here's how I do it. I've actually just marked out in pencil right here and here where my screws are going to go. So I've pre-drilled a hole for my screw, and I'm using the Camo deck screw here. So I'm just gonna do this on the front of the deck, and then for the back, I'm gonna do a trick. You can actually use a standard deck screw for this, but I like the looks of this better. Tip number 3 is to upgrade from your face screw deck installation method to hidden fasteners. You can't see them, and that is entirely the point. Now, there's 2 different tools that I have used that are extremely popular with homeowners. Check them out right here. This is the Marksman Pro Axe 1. This will be very popular for a lot of our American viewers because it has a 1/16 spacing, and this is the Marksman Pro, which has a 3/16 spacing, and right here are the built-in spacers. You can see on this model, it's a lot thinner. Now, there is an advantage of actually going with the Pro Axe 1, which I like, and that means you control the spacing. So what I have found with this tool right here, the Marksman Pro, is it does have the 3/16 spacing. However, as your pressure-treated decking shrinks, that can increase to a 1/4 inch of a gap. And for some people, that might be a little too big. As I want to control the gap, this is the winner today. I'm gonna go with a 1/16 spacing. Now for the first deck board, I'm actually gonna install the screw right here at the back. And this is a special screw that has a rake tip on the front, and you just install it down the side. Line it up, apply consistent pressure here, pull the trigger, and there we go. And this is the beauty of it, is the fastener will be hidden and you won't see it throughout the entire installation. So what is key with the Camo deck system is you have to use their edge deck screws, which look like this, and they come with a special bit in the box. This one is good for 200 square feet, and they have different sizes depending on the decking that you are using, whether it's pressure treated, cedar, or composite. So for today's installation, I'm using spacers, and I'm using a 1/8 spacing on this entire deck. Now let's take a look at my second deck board that's going in. Just gonna use the spacers, and I'm using tape just to make things super easy for myself so I don't make a mistake, because you know, mistakes do happen. I'm gonna take my 2 screws now for my second board, load them into the tool, and I'm gonna start at the back here and apply even pressure, drive it into the back, and then I'm gonna drive it into the front like so. I'm gonna continue along this entire board. And a tip for you, don't muscle this. If you push too hard on pressure treated wood, you're actually gonna get an indentation. I usually say muscle it because a woman in construction has to muscle it, but there is a time for a little finesse. So when it comes to selecting my deck boards, I like to choose the side that just looks the best and has the fewest knot holes. But can you take a look at this board here? I've laid out all my decking here. And look at this board, it is absolutely wonky. Now this is a big no-no. A mistake that a lot of people make is in between your decking project, tarp all of your lumber, because if you leave it out in the sun, your deck boards will warp and they will twist, and you won't want that to happen to you. So we're gonna get rid of this board right here because this is no longer usable. We're gonna find one that looks a little bit better and move it to the front. As you can see, this is a common problem. We have a bowed deck board. It's looking like this, and that's a common problem that brings us to tip number 4, which is how to fix bent deck boards. This is a great solution. What I like to use is a glazier bar. This is a pry bar, but it's exceptionally thin, so it doesn't wreck your decking. I find it works really well, and I have a deck board with 2 screws. I'm just gonna put it on the back side here, because the problem is I need to pull this deck board in tight so I can maintain a consistent gap along my deck board. So what I've done here is I've just installed this deck board on the back side of my bowed board, and you can see I need to pull it this way, so I have 2 spacers here to create the gap. And what I find works best is I'm actually just going to install the screw here on the back side because I need to pull the deck board this way, and if you do the front screw first, you're actually going to pull it that way. You're going to be working against yourself. So I'm going to take my bit and drive it here, and take your glazer bar, fit it in, and you can see it's actually just going to pull the deck board forward a bit. And you got to be careful because you don't want the deck board to come up, right? And you don't want to damage the deck board either. Now you're gonna say, hey, you're supposed to hold on to the tool, but I only have 2 hands. If you have a friend to help you out, this will be even easier for you. But your boot comes in handy too. So I'm just gonna hit the release and move it over. You're gonna see I'm gonna fit it onto the joist there. This is centered up on the joist, and I have good spacing here. If you need to use the pry again, very gently, you can. And sometimes I use my knee. And there we go, and now I can go in the front because I have 2 screws holding it in nice and firmly. Okay, now we'll go in on the front. And you know, you just use what you have. Sometimes it's a knee, sometimes it's a boot. Okay guys, so I'm actually using a small deck board. What you can use is something longer. So you put your 2 screws in and just tweak it with your glazier bar and fix it as you go. It'll be a lot easier. I just don't have a scrap big enough at this point, but I'm sure I'll find one. So to bring this gap forward, just gonna step on my board here with my boot. The other one goes in behind with my glazier bar. Use my boot to my advantage because you know I need free hands for this. On the back side. And this is where boots come in handy. So now that we're at the end of the board here, you can see that we've fixed the gap and it's maintained the 1/8 spacing along the entire deck board. We fixed it. So I've continued on with our decking and I've installed it all the way up to the last board here, which is closest to the house. And there is a tip if you want to have a fastener-free installation on this last board. I'm gonna flip this over and I'll show you what I'm doing here. For the final board, I flipped it over. I'm using L brackets. These are galvanized and I'm putting it on this side. And if you're wondering, hey, why are you putting it on this side? It's because our Camo deck tool doesn't work when it's really close to the house. So you can use an L bracket method. So I'm going to continue on fastening L brackets along this edge. So when you flip it, it will be here close to the house. So as I get my spacers into position here, I have a tip for you guys on this final board, and that is make sure that you choose the straightest, most perfect board for the board right next to your house, because you do not want to be using the glazier bar on this one. And now that brings us to tip number 7, which is how do we cut all of these deck boards, because they're all way too long. How do we get these crooked boards to be nice and straight? Chalk line. So if you are lucky enough to have a straight board, you can clamp it on one end and the other. Let's give this a shot, see how we do here. And if you'd like to know the easiest way to build a deck, most people are doing it the hard way, you can check out this video right here. I'll see you in the next one.